Hello, I'm Judith Blackstone, and in this presentation, I'm going to be speaking about the realization process and how we can apply the practices of the realization process to healing from trauma, to healing from the effects of trauma. The realization process, I've been teaching it for many years, almost 40 years, and I've also been a psychotherapist for many years in private practice. Before that, I was a professional dancer. And this work came about because many years ago, when I was a dancer, I injured my back quite badly. And that put an end to my career as a dancer. And I felt very desperately in need for healing that injury. And of course, first I made the rounds to the medical profession, and I went to body workers and I went to healers, and I got to meet a lot of very interesting people. But nothing really came close to getting deep enough or subtle enough to heal this injury. So finally, I was left on my own with it. And I simply lay on the floor of my dance studio where I was living in Manhattan, my loft, where I was hoping I would be making dances. And instead I lay on the floor and open to healing. And I began to experience a very subtle depth of myself, which I can now understand is a depth in which the body and the mind become absolutely one, so that we awaken to a level of our being that's actually feels like it's made of consciousness. And that was an amazing discovery for me. I had, of course, been focused on my body for years, training it as a dancer, but I actually had to let go of that kind of superimposed dancer's body in order to relax into this very subtle level of myself, to find something that felt authentic. And it does, this very deep, subtle level of consciousness that we can experience in our body feels like our authentic being, feels like who we really are. And that was just an extraordinary revelation for me. Now, at the same time, I had people coming to the studio for dance classes, because that's how I made my living. So I began to teach them about this very subtle attunement that they could have with themselves that would uncover this aspect of that felt like reality within their bodies. I was discovering various interesting things as I lay in my studio and as I worked with this healing. And one was that, for example, if I found a point to the right and to the left of myself, that would bring my spine into alignment without my having to volitionally move it into alignment. Right? It was as if something innate was happening that could bring me into that healing place. Another thing I discovered was that just lying on the floor and dropping my weight to the ground, energy came up through my body and also began to bring me into alignment. So I began to teach this, and those practices that I developed with those few dance students that I had became the beginning of the realization process. Then after that, of course, I trained as a psychotherapist, and I also worked with many different spiritual teachers in both the Buddhist and the Hindu traditions. And then I discovered that this very subtle level that I could feel within my body, and that even seemed to change the air around me, was something that they had been teaching and talking about and naming, describing for many, many hundreds of years. So I felt very confirmed, both in my own path and in what I was teaching. Now, the realization process itself, it has three main aspects to it. And one is simply the embodiment work, where we can use these practices. The realization process is a series of practices, and we can use the practices to make deeper inward contact with the body, to heal chronic imbalances in the body, and that sort of thing, to heal chronic injuries. and chronic pain. We can also use it as a psychological healing, and that's the aspect of the work that I'll be talking about most in this presentation, as a way of seeing how we've feeling and seeing how we've organized ourselves in reaction to traumatic experiences, and how we can use the realization process practices to help recover ourselves from those experiences. And then the third aspect is the spiritual aspect, where some people come to the work just for that, what we call non-dual opening, that self-other oneness. So the realization process is a series of practices for uncovering in ourselves something that we can experience as a very subtle consciousness, very subtle level of consciousness, undivided consciousness, pervading our body and our environment at the same time. The reason that it's so healing psychologically is that because as we experience it pervading our body, gives us a sense of our individual wholeness. And that means we can think and feel and sense, perceive as a whole, all at once. So those fragments, that scattering that we experience in traumatic experience, begins to find a deeper level in which we feel whole. And at the same time, this fundamental consciousness, I call it fundamental consciousness, pervading our environment as well, gives us a sense of deep contact with the world around us, with other people, without losing that inward contact with ourselves.